Alright, now that we've got a good foundation on workplace stress concepts, let's move on to some intriguing theoretical approaches that can help us understand and explain stress in the work environment. First up, we have the vitamin stress model developed by War. He came up with several job features that contribute to well-being, some of which might ring a bell from the lecture on motivation. Most of these features should make sense intuitively, like environmental clarity, which is all about having clear feedback on your performance, job security, and a sense of what the future holds. The vitamin stress model suggests that mental health is affected by job characteristics in a way similar to how vitamins impact our physical health. The idea here is that just like vitamins, these job features can have a nonlinear effect on our well-being. Too little of these features can be detrimental to mental health, but having more than needed might not necessarily lead to significant improvements. Take, for instance, your daily vitamin intake. If you consume 10 times the recommended amount, you're not going to be significantly healthier than someone who just meets the daily requirement. War believes that the same principle applies to these job features. You need enough of them to maintain good well-being, but any additional won't make a huge difference. In fact, too much of some features like task demands can actually decrease your well-being. This means that job features initially have a positive effect on mental health, but beyond a certain level, further increases start to have a negative effect. War classified 6 of these job features as following the additional decrement relationship: control, externally generated goals, interpersonal contact, skill use, variety. For these job features, you could have too much of a good thing. So it's about finding that sweet spot. 3 features followed what he called the constant effect relationship: money, safety, and a valued social position. For these features, having enough is better than lacking these things, but there's no additional benefit to having more once you have enough. That said, there's no cost to having more. Supportive supervision was later added to the model without any specific prediction on how it relates to mental health. Now, support for this model has been somewhat inconsistent. In one study, researchers might find the predicted effects, while in another, they don't. So the jury's still out on this one. One reason for these inconsistencies could be the complexity of this nonlinear hypothesis. It's tough to pin down exactly how much of each job feature is just right and how much is too much. These questions are challenging to answer empirically, making it difficult to evaluate the evidence for these predictions. This complexity also poses practical challenges. Imagine you're an IO psychologist with a manager who comes to you for help in reducing employee stress. You tell them to ensure task demands are moderately high, but not too high. It sounds great in theory, but how do you translate that into tangible action? Despite these limitations, the vitamin stress model offered important early insights into the relationship between job features and well-being, and serves as a reminder that balance is key when it comes to creating a healthy work environment. Let's move on to another influential model of work stress, the job demands control model. Despite being one of the oldest models, it still holds significance today. This model is built on 2 key factors: demands and control. Demands represent the workload and challenges you face in your job, like meeting tight deadlines or juggling multiple tasks. Control refers to the flexibility or autonomy you have in dealing with these demands. Control has 2 parts: decision latitude. Can you decide how to approach your work, or are you stuck following a strict plan? And skill variety. Are you able to use different skills and learn new things on the job? The theory says that control can offset the negative impact of demands. So if you're in a demanding job, having control helps you manage that pressure. Now, 2 hypotheses emerge from this model. The strain hypothesis suggests that if you're in a job with high demands, having low control, like working retail during a holiday rush with a micromanaging boss, puts you at a higher risk for serious stress and even physical illness. On the flip side, the stress buffer hypothesis says that demanding jobs with more control, think of a graphic designer facing tight deadlines but free to choose their design approach, are less straining. Workers can actively meet job demands, turning the situation into a chance for growth and development. So here are the 4 job types based on demands and control. 1 is high strain job, high demands plus low control, and this is the most stressful form of job. 2, low strain job, low demands plus high control. 3, passive jobs, low demands plus low control, and these jobs are thought to lead to feelings of stagnation. And finally, active jobs, high demands and high control, where the control helps you handle those demands. So when demands come with enough control, they become challenging stressors rather than hindrance stressors. There's robust evidence supporting the strain hypothesis, which states that highly demanding jobs with low control are straining for workers. However, the stress buffering hypothesis has less backing. Even in high control jobs, demands are still straining, albeit less so. Eventually, researchers identified that there's another crucial factor to consider beyond demands and control, and this is social support. So the demands control model later became the demands control support model. Social support can make a world of difference. It can come from supervisors, family, colleagues, friends. Imagine working in a fast-paced retail environment during the holiday season. The demands are high and you're feeling the pressure. That's when emotional support, like a supervisor who understands the stress and offers encouragement, can make a world of difference. On the other hand, instrumental support might look like coworkers who are willing to step in and help manage the workload, making the job more manageable. Research indicates that a lack of social support, regardless of control levels, can increase the likelihood of negative physical health outcomes. So even if you have control but lack support, that's not ideal. And if you're lacking both control and social support while facing high demands, well, that's going to be extra tough on you. Now, a significant critique of the job demands control model and the job demands control support model, which also applies to other theories we'll discuss today, is that it focuses on the characteristics of the jobs themselves, rather than people's perceptions of them. In other words, it zeroes in on the objective environment, not the subjective one. Remember when I mentioned that different people will perceive the same job in different ways? A fascinating study highlighted this point. Participants completed a survey based on the job demands control model to gauge their subjective perceptions of demands, control, and support. Then job analysts assessed these same jobs to determine these factors more objectively. What they discovered was that the model's predictions didn't hold up when using objective classifications. Instead, they only rang true when considering employees' subjective work experiences. This means that the demand control model and the demands control support model are only useful for understanding the effects of individual perceptions of a job and their relationship to the experience of strain. While some might argue that this isn't a major issue, others believe it makes applying this theory in practice more challenging. There's no objective way to determine how strenuous a job will be, and individual differences in perceptions play a crucial role. Therefore, when trying to understand and manage work-related stress, it's essential to account for these unique perspectives and experiences. Now let's explore another model, known as the effort-reward imbalance model. Imagine yourself trying to balance university, a part-time job, and your social life. Are the rewards you receive proportional to the effort you put in? If you feel like you're working extremely hard without seeing the rewards you deserve, it might lead to strain. Effort doesn't just come in the form of work demands, hours, or workload. It also includes factors like job insecurity. Think about the stress of potentially losing your part-time job at the campus bookstore while trying to pass your exams. The model recognizes that job insecurity can be exhausting and draining. The model also considers intrinsic factors that contribute to effort, such as critical coping, which involves the need for control. Picture a friend who constantly puts pressure on themselves and struggles to step back from work tasks when necessary. They might experience a heightened sense of effort, making them more susceptible to strain. On the other hand, rewards encompass aspects like money, esteem, and status. For instance, receiving a paycheck or being recognized for your hard work can be rewarding. Now, this model also has its limitations. The survey used to measure effort-reward imbalance isn't the most reliable, so testing the model has been challenging. However, a 2006 meta-analysis found some interesting links between stress and health outcomes. The researchers analyzed data from over 80,000 employees and discovered that jobs with high demands and low control increased the risk of heart disease. This is consistent with the demands control model, but similarly, jobs with a poor effort-reward imbalance also heighten this risk. Interestingly, it appears that effort-reward imbalance might be an even more significant factor. That said, both having high demands and low control and poor effort-reward balance are stressful and contribute to health risks like heart disease. So combining these two models helps us better understand and predict these negative outcomes. And this leads us to the most contemporary stress model, the job demands resources model. This approach brings together the best ideas from its predecessors, recognizing that control and support aren't the only resources that can act as stress buffers. The model acknowledges the variety of demands and resources, understanding that their effectiveness varies across different jobs and work contexts. Plus, it embraces positive psychology by examining both human strengths and weaknesses, focusing on work engagement, a positive emotional and motivational state, instead of solely on burnout. What makes the job demands and resources model so practical is its ability to consider a wide array of factors. It breaks these factors down into two categories: job demands and resources. Job demands include elements like workload, time pressure, role ambiguity, and conflict. Resources, on the other hand, are the positive aspects that motivate and enable us to excel in our work, such as feedback, rewards, and control. Imagine juggling multiple assignments, exams, and a part-time job, so demands, while having access to resources like tutoring, supportive professors, and study groups. The model proposes that job demands increase the likelihood of burnout, while resources enhance engagement and protect against burnout. In 2019, Lessener and colleagues conducted a meta-analysis of 74 longitudinal studies with over 30,000 participants, examining the relationship between job demands, resources, burnout, and work engagement. And their findings revealed that job demands increased the likelihood of future burnout, while job resources reduced this tendency and increased future work engagement. These results provided strong support for the job demands resources model. However, the model does have some critics. Since it's relatively new compared to other models, there's less research on its implications for performance and physical health. Additionally, there's a need for more intervention-focused studies to show causal relationships. Another point of contention is whether burnout and engagement are truly distinct or simply opposite sides of the same continuum. Can you be burnt out and engaged simultaneously, or are these two mutually exclusive? The model has also been criticized for its complexity. While it includes a wide range of factors which can be helpful in practice, it makes research more challenging by making it difficult to pinpoint the most critical constructs. That being said, the job demands resources model is still probably the most dominant model of stress out there today. It's had a huge impact both on the science of stress and on practice. While the previous models we've covered describe the relationships between job characteristics and outcomes, they don't clearly explain how these characteristics impact the process. This is where the transactional stress model comes in. It focuses on how stress emerges as a result of the dynamic interaction between an individual and their environment. Imagine you're the barista at a busy cafe. Stress arises when you perceive the situation as requiring more resources than you have available. The transactional stress model emphasizes the importance of individual appraisal and coping mechanisms in determining how you'll react to the situation. So say during a morning rush at the cafe, your manager suddenly announces that 2 coworkers called in sick and you'll need to cover their tasks as well. This could be a stressful situation. The transactional stress model suggests that you'll go through an appraisal process to assess the threat and the resources needed to handle it. The primary appraisal involves evaluating how threatening the situation is for you. In this case, you might ask yourself, how bad is the situation? Can I handle the extra workload? The secondary appraisal is about the resources needed, such as time and energy, and whether you have what it takes to overcome the challenge. The transactional stress model helps us understand how our individual perceptions and coping mechanisms influence our responses to stressful situations in the workplace. In the barista example, your appraisal determines which coping strategy you'll use, problem-focused or emotion-focused coping. Problem-focused coping is all about tackling the problem head-on and overcoming the challenge. It's often employed for those who have more personal and social resources, making them better equipped to handle the stressor. When the stressor is something that can be changed, problem-focused coping generally leads to less psychological distress and less depression. For instance, a barista might quickly prioritize tasks delegate duties to other available coworkers, and create an action plan to efficiently manage the extra workload. Emotion-focused coping, on the other hand, involves avoidance and withdrawal as a means to cope with stress. While emotion-focused coping can be useful for brief stress relief, it's not an effective long-term strategy. However, it may be the only option if you don't have much control over the situation. For example, a barista who doesn't have the authority to reprioritize or delegate tasks might resort to taking deep breaths, chatting with a coworker about the stress, or daydreaming about post-work plans as a way to momentarily escape the pressure. It's crucial to remember that this is an iterative process, and you'll likely reappraise the situation as it unfolds and adjust your coping strategies accordingly. The transactional stress model has since evolved to address the causal factors that determine whether you'll tackle stress head-on with problem-focused coping or take a step back and soothe your emotions with emotion-focused coping. These factors come in two flavors: person variables and environment variables. Person variables include your values, commitments, and beliefs. For example, if you have a strong sense of control and motivation, you're more likely to face stressors with a problem-focused approach. On the other hand, if you're someone who tends to worry or feels overwhelmed by challenges, you might lean more towards emotion-focused coping. Environmental variables are all about the context you're in, such as situational demands, constraints, and resources. For example, if you have a supportive social network, you might feel more capable of tackling problems directly. However, if you're facing uncertainty or imminent harm, emotion-focused coping might be your go-to strategy to manage the stress. The transactional stress model also highlights the immediate and long-term effects of coping. When you're faced with a stressful situation, your primary and secondary appraisals, along with any reappraisals, drive your coping response, either problem-focused or emotion-focused. Successfully resolving the situation may lead to reduced short-term stress and fewer negative feelings. However, if the situation isn't resolved, those negative feelings may persist. Over time, unresolved stress can lead to long-term effects on somatic health, well-being, and social functioning. So this theory helps us recognize the impact of stress on our lives and the importance of effective coping strategies in maintaining our overall health and happiness. A lot of research has been done on the transactional stress model. Both lab and field studies have provided evidence for the cognitive appraisal process and its influence on stress, which has stood the test of time over decades. In the recent work stress literature, researchers have started combining the transactional stress model with the concept of challenge versus hindrance stressors. This integration focuses on distinguishing between challenge and hindrance appraisals of work demands, which align with problem-focused and emotion-focused coping behaviors. However, measuring the in-the-moment appraisal process is tricky. This appraisal may happen rapidly and in real time, and they may occur so quickly that the person might not even realize they're making a decision about how to cope. Despite this challenge, studies that have attempted to measure these processes generally find that problem-focused coping strategies tend to be more effective than emotion-focused ones for managing strain outcomes. In practical applications, the transactional stress model is sometimes used in psychoeducation interventions. By teaching people about stress and coping, the hope is that they'll be better equipped to handle life's challenges. These interventions have shown some effectiveness, although it's hard to determine their unique contribution, as they're often part of a more comprehensive package of interventions. As the stress literature has evolved, the focus has shifted towards self-management. This approach addresses issues like energy management, emotion regulation, self-regulation, and recovery practices. And we'll talk a little bit more about this research in the lecture on work-life balance.